How did one wild weekend in Vegas, with my best friend, lead to my fiancé handing me legal papers instead of a wedding ring? What happens when the person you thought would always forgive you decides to fight back? By the book. Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The morning light filtered through our townhouse windows as I scrolled through my phone, ignoring Nate's pointed glances from across the breakfast table. He was doing that thing again, clearing his throat like he wanted to say something important but couldn't find the words. "Zadie," Nate finally said, setting down his coffee mug with deliberate precision. "We need to talk about Owen." I didn't look up from my phone. "What about him?" "You've been texting him constantly. Even during our engagement dinner last week, you were—" "Oh my God, Nate." I rolled my eyes and finally met his gaze. "Owen's my best friend. We've been friends since college. You knew this when you proposed." Nathaniel Sloan, my fiancé of 6 months, ran his hands through his dark hair, a nervous habit I'd grown tired of. At 33, he was everything my mother thought I should want: stable job in finance, owned property, talked about retirement plans. But lately, his predictability felt suffocating. "It's not about friendship," he said carefully. "It's about boundaries. The way he looks at you, the way you laugh at his jokes. Are you seriously going to be one of those controlling husbands?" I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Because if you are, maybe we should reconsider this whole wedding thing." The words hung in the air like a threat. Nate's face went pale, and I felt a twisted satisfaction at his reaction. This was how I handled conflict. Go nuclear first, apologize later if necessary. "That's not what I'm saying," he said quietly. "I just think—" My phone buzzed with a text from Owen. "Vegas this weekend. I got us a suite at the Bellagio. Time to celebrate your last months of freedom properly." I grinned at the message, and Nate noticed immediately. "What's so funny?" "Owen wants to take me to Vegas this weekend. A little pre-wedding celebration." I watched Nate's expression carefully, enjoying the way his jaw tightened. "This weekend, we were supposed to look at flowers for the reception." "Flowers can wait. When's the next time I'll be able to have fun with my best friend? Once we're married, you'll probably want me to cut him off completely." "That's not fair, and you know it." I moved closer to him, softening my voice in that way that usually worked. "Nate, baby, this is about trust. Don't you trust me?" He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his eyes, something I couldn't quite read. "I trust you," he said finally. "I'm not sure I trust him." "Well, you're going to have to. I'm booking the flight." I pulled out my phone and started typing, making a show of purchasing the tickets right in front of him. Nate sat there silently, watching me with that unreadable expression. "There," I said triumphantly. "Booked. Vegas, here I come." "Zadie, it's all about trust, remember?" I kissed his forehead condescendingly. "I'll be back Sunday night. Try not to miss me too much." As I headed upstairs to pack, I called my sister Ava. "Girl, you're really going to Vegas with Owen?" Ava's voice was excited. Nate must be losing his mind. He's being ridiculous, jealous and insecure. I mean, what kind of marriage would we have if I can't even travel with my friends? "Exactly. He knew who you were when he proposed. If he wanted some boring housewife, he should have found someone else." This was why I loved my sister. At 28, Ava understood that life was meant to be lived, not carefully planned and budgeted like Nate preferred. "Mum called me yesterday," Ava continued. "She's worried about the wedding expenses." "What did you tell her?" "That Nate can afford it. His mother sure likes to remind everyone how successful he is." Julia Sloan, Nate's mother, had never warmed up to me. She thought I was too impulsive, too social, too everything. The feeling was mutual. Speaking of Julia, she's been texting Nate about the wedding planning. I think she's trying to take over. "Don't let her. It's your wedding too." After hanging up with Ava, I continued packing, throwing clothes into my suitcase with growing excitement. Vegas represented everything Nate wasn't: spontaneous, thrilling, unpredictable. Owen understood that part of me. When I came back downstairs, Nate was in his home office, staring at his computer screen. "I'm leaving for the airport in an hour," I announced. He didn't look up. "Have fun." Something in his tone made me pause. "Are you mad?" "No, Zadie, I'm not mad." But he was something. I just couldn't figure out what. An hour later, Owen picked me up in his red convertible, music blasting, his infectious grin making me forget all about Nate's weird mood. "Ready to show Vegas what we're made of?" Owen asked, throwing my suitcase in the back. "More than ready." As we drove away, I saw Nate watching from the window. I waved cheerfully, but he didn't wave back. Instead, he pulled out his phone and started typing something. "Everything okay with the fiancé?" Owen asked, noticing my distraction. "He's just being Nate, worried about everything, controlling as usual." "Well, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right?" I laughed and turned up the radio. "Right." But as we drove toward the airport, I couldn't shake the image of Nate's face in the window. Not angry, not hurt, but something else entirely. Something that looked almost like resignation. The Bellagio suite was everything Owen had promised: floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Strip, a marble bathroom bigger than our bedroom at home, and a fully stocked bar that Owen immediately put to good use. "To freedom," he declared, handing me a champagne flute. "To friendship," I corrected, but I was smiling as I said it. Owen had always been attractive, tall, athletic, with that easy confidence that drew people to him. In college, half the girls in our dorm had crushes on him, but he'd always insisted we were just friends. Still, there was something electric about being here with him, away from Nate's disapproving looks and Julia's passive-aggressive comments. We spent the afternoon by the pool, and I couldn't resist posting photos. Owen and I, lounging on adjacent chairs, him bringing me drinks, both of us laughing at something on his phone. I made sure to tag our location and add captions like "living my best life" and "some people know how to have fun." "Your phone's been buzzing non-stop," Owen observed, nodding toward my bag. I glanced at the screen. 3 missed calls from Nate and several texts. I didn't bother reading them. "Let me guess," Owen said. "The warden checking in?" "He's not that bad," I said automatically, but even I didn't sound convinced. "Come on, Zadie. When's the last time he surprised you? When's the last time he made you laugh until your stomach hurt?" I tried to think of an example and came up empty. "He's stable, reliable. Boring. That's not fair." But as the day wore on, I found myself comparing everything to how it would be with Nate. He would have insisted on sunscreen every hour. He would have complained about the drink prices. He would have wanted to stick to a schedule. Owen, on the other hand, was spontaneous. When I mentioned wanting to try the casino, he immediately got us VIP treatment at the poker tables. When I said I was hungry, he somehow got us last-minute reservations at the most exclusive restaurant in the hotel. "How do you do it?" I asked, as we were seated at a table with a perfect view of the fountains. "Do what?" "Make everything seem so effortless, so fun." He leaned across the table, his eyes serious for once. "Because I don't overthink everything. I don't plan every moment to death. I just live." My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call, and Nate's photo filled the screen. "Answer it," Owen said. "I'll be right back." I reluctantly swiped to accept the call. "Zadie? Finally. I've been trying to reach you all day." "I'm on vacation, Nate. I'm allowed to not answer my phone every 5 minutes." "I saw your Instagram posts." Of course he had. "And you're practically sitting in Owen's lap in half of them." I looked around the restaurant, lowering my voice. "We're friends hanging out. That's what friends do. Friends don't post pictures that look like..." He paused, and I could hear him taking a deep breath. Never mind. When will you be back tomorrow? Sunday night. I already told you that. Zadie, I need to know that. You need to know what? That I'm not cheating on you. God, Nate, do you hear yourself? I'm trying to have a conversation with my fiancé about boundaries, and you're acting like I'm the problem. Because you are the problem. You're jealous and controlling and… I have to go, he said suddenly. We'll talk when you get home. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, fury building in my chest. How dare he ruin my weekend with his insecurity? Owen returned to the table, took one look at my face and signaled the waiter. We need shots, the good stuff. He's unbelievable, I said, launching into a recap of the conversation. He's acting like I'm having some torrid affair just because I posted a few photos. Maybe he's right to be worried, Owen said quietly. I looked up sharply. What's that supposed to mean? Maybe he sees what I see. Which is? Owen reached across the table and took my hand. That you're not happy, Zadie. That you're settling for someone who doesn't appreciate who you are. His thumb traced across my knuckles, and I felt a flutter in my stomach that had nothing to do with the champagne. Owen, I'm not saying you should call off the wedding. I'm just saying you deserve someone who celebrates your spontaneity instead of trying to control it. We sat there in silence, his hand still covering mine. Around us, the restaurant buzzed with conversation and laughter, but I felt like we were in our own bubble. We should get back, I said finally, but I didn't pull my hand away. Should we? The way he was looking at me made my heart race. This was dangerous territory, and we both knew it. My phone buzzed with a text. Not from Nate this time, but from Ava. Saw your posts. You look so happy. Heart emoji, fire emoji, heart emoji. The message broke the spell. I pulled my hand back and grabbed my purse. Let's go gamble, I said, forcing brightness into my voice. I'm feeling lucky. But as we walked through the casino, Owen's words echoed in my mind. Was I settling? Was I choosing security over happiness? Later that night, back in the suite, I posted one more photo. Owen and me at the blackjack table, his arm around my waist, both of us grinning at the camera. I captioned it, "Sometimes you have to take risks." Within minutes, my phone exploded with notifications, likes, comments, shares. But buried in the social media frenzy was a single text from Nate. "We need to talk, when you're back." Something about the message felt different, final. I showed it to Owen, who was mixing drinks at the bar. "Sounds ominous," he said. "He's just being dramatic." But as I got ready for bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed a line today. Not physically. Nothing had happened between Owen and me. But emotionally, that was a different story. I fell asleep to the sound of the strip below, Owen in the bedroom next to mine, and my phone full of messages I didn't want to read. The family engagement dinner was supposed to be a celebration. My father had made reservations at Chez Laurent, the kind of upscale French restaurant where the waiters wore bow ties and the wine list required a small loan. The whole family would be there. My parents, Ava, Nate, and unfortunately, Julia. I'd returned from Vegas Sunday night to find Nate already asleep, or at least pretending to be. Monday morning, he'd left for work before I woke up. By Tuesday, the silence between us had grown so thick I could practically cut it with a knife. "You look beautiful," my father said as I arrived at the restaurant, kissing my cheek. Eric Loxley had always been the peacekeeper in our family, the one who smoothed over conflicts and found middle ground. At 62, he still believed that most problems could be solved with good intentions and honest conversation. "Thanks, Dad. Where's everyone else?" "Nate's running late. Something about a client meeting. Julia's already here, holding court at the table." I groaned internally. Julia Sloan had a talent for making every gathering about herself, usually by finding subtle ways to criticize everyone else's choices. The hostess led us to a private dining room where the rest of the family was already seated. Ava jumped up to hug me. her enthusiasm a welcome contrast to the tension I'd been feeling. "You look amazing. That Vegas sun did you good," she said loudly enough for Julia to hear. Julia's smile was razor-sharp. "Yes, I saw the photos on social media. Very adventurous." "It was just a weekend with a friend," I said, taking my seat. "Of course it was, dear." The way she said dear made it sound like an insult. Nate arrived 15 minutes later, apologizing to the table but barely making eye contact with me. He looked tired, I realized, studying his face as he shook hands with my father and kissed my mother's cheek. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usual easy smile seemed forced. "Sorry I'm late," he said, finally acknowledging me with a brief nod. "Traffic was terrible." The conversation during appetizers was stilted, everyone dancing around the obvious tension between Nate and me. My mother tried to bring up wedding planning, flowers, music, the final guest count, but Nate's responses were monosyllabic. "The Hendersons RSVP'd, yes," Mom said brightly. "That brings us to 212 guests." Nate said, not looking up from his salad. "And the caterer confirmed the menu. The salmon will be—" "Actually," I interrupted, "I'm thinking we should add a cocktail hour. Something fun and spontaneous, not so rigid." This got Nate's attention. He looked at me directly for the first time all evening. "We already finalized the timeline," he said quietly. "Timelines can be changed. It's supposed to be a party, not a military operation." Julia set down her wineglass with a soft clink. "Planning is important, Zadie. Some of us appreciate knowing what to expect." "Some of us appreciate spontaneity," I shot back. "Life doesn't always go according to plan." "Clearly," Julia murmured. The word hung in the air like smoke. Everyone at the table understood the implication. "What's that supposed to mean?" I demanded. "Nothing at all. I'm sure your weekend in Las Vegas was perfectly innocent." "It was. Of course. Though I have to say, the photos were quite intimate." My father cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should order the main course." "No, Dad, let her finish." I turned back to Julia, my voice rising. "You have something to say, so say it." "I simply think," Julia said, her voice maddeningly calm, "that a woman about to be married should be more mindful of appearances, more considerate of her fiancé's feelings. And I think a future mother-in-law should mind her own business." "Zadie," my mother said sharply. But I was done being polite. "You know what? I'm tired of everyone acting like I committed some crime. I went to Vegas with my best friend. We had fun. We took pictures. Since when is that a federal offense?" "Since you started posting photos that make you look single," Julia replied. The restaurant had gone quiet around us. Other diners were starting to stare. "At least I know how to have fun," I said, my voice getting louder. "At least I don't spend my entire life worried about what other people think. Some of us actually live instead of just existing." I looked directly at Nate as I said it, making sure he understood the message was for him too. "That's enough," my father said firmly. But I wasn't done. "You want to know what's really sad? Nate used to be fun. He used to be spontaneous. Now he's turned into this boring, controlling—" "Stop." Nate's voice was quiet, but something in his tone made everyone at the table freeze. He was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, but something colder. "Just stop," he repeated. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Finally, Julia reached for her purse. "I think I've heard enough," she said. "Eric, thank you for dinner. It was illuminating." She stood to leave, and Nate stood with her. "I'll drive you home, Mum." "Nate, wait," I said, suddenly realizing how far things had gone. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." He looked around the table, at my parents, at Ava, finally at me. "You meant every word." He turned to my father. "Thank you for dinner, Eric. I'm sorry it ended this way." And then he was gone, Julia following behind him like a protective shadow. The remaining four of us sat in stunned silence. Finally, Ava spoke. "Well, that was awkward." "Zadie," my father said, his voice heavy with disappointment. What were you thinking? I was defending myself. She was attacking me. She was expressing concern, and you escalated it into a scene. Whose side are you on? There shouldn't be sides, my mother said quietly. You're supposed to be a family. I looked around the table at their faces, disappointed, embarrassed, worried. Even Ava, usually my biggest supporter, looked uncomfortable. I need some air, I said, grabbing my purse. Outside the restaurant, I called Owen. How bad was it? He asked after I'd given him the summary. Pretty bad. Julia basically accused me of cheating, and I may have called Nate boring in front of my entire family. Ouch. The worst part is, I don't even feel that sorry. Is that terrible? Owen was quiet for a moment. Maybe you're just tired of pretending to be someone you're not. When I got home that night, Nate's car wasn't in the driveway. I found a note on the kitchen counter. Staying at my mother's tonight. We'll talk tomorrow. I crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash. Then I opened a bottle of wine and called Ava. He's being ridiculous, I told her, running to Mommy because his feelings got hurt. I don't know, Zadie. You were pretty harsh tonight. You're supposed to be on my side. I am on your side. That's why I'm telling you that maybe you should apologize. But as I hung up the phone and poured another glass of wine, I couldn't bring myself to feel guilty. If Nate couldn't handle me at my worst, how could he claim to love me at my best? I fell asleep on the couch, still in my dress from dinner, the empty wine bottle on the coffee table beside me. Wednesday morning brought a hangover and a series of increasingly frantic texts from my mother, but still nothing from Nate. I dragged myself to work, hoping the familiar routine of my marketing coordinator job would provide some distraction from the disaster my life was becoming. Instead, I walked into what felt like a fishbowl. Morning, Zadie, my coworker Jessica said, her voice overly bright. How was your weekend? Something in her tone made me look up sharply. Jessica was notorious for office gossip, and the gleam in her eyes suggested she'd already heard something. Fine, I said carefully. Why? Oh, no reason. Just saw some fun photos on Instagram. Vegas looked amazing. I forced a smile and headed to my desk, but I could feel eyes following me across the office. By lunch, I was certain that everyone had seen the photos from my weekend with Owen. The whispers stopped when I walked by. Conversations resumed just a little too quickly, and more than one person asked about my friend, with air quotes around the word. The breaking point came when my boss, Margaret Chen, called me into her office at 2:00. Close the door, she said, not looking up from her computer. Margaret was in her 50s, had built the marketing department from the ground up, and didn't tolerate drama in her workplace. I sat down across from her desk, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. Is there a problem? I asked. You tell me. I've had 3 people ask me today whether you're having marital problems. I'm not married. You know what I mean. People are talking, Zadie, about your social media posts, about your weekend activities. It's becoming a distraction. Heat flooded my face. My personal life is none of their business. It is when it affects workplace productivity. Half my staff spent their morning discussing your Instagram feed instead of working on the Morrison campaign. That's not my fault. Margaret finally looked up at me. Isn't it? You posted the photos. You tagged the locations. You made your personal drama public. There's no drama. I went to Vegas with a friend. Since when is that a crime? Since you're engaged to someone else and the photos suggest otherwise. I stood up abruptly. This is harassment. You can't police my social media. I can if it affects your work performance or creates a hostile work environment. And right now, Zadie, you're the one creating the hostile environment. I left Margaret's office furious and humiliated. The rest of the afternoon crawled by, every conversation feeling loaded, every glance seeming judgmental. By 5:00, I was ready to scream. That's when I found the envelope. It was in my work mailbox, unmarked, just a plain manila envelope with my name written in block letters. Inside was a stack of printed screenshots, text messages between Owen and me, Instagram DMs, even some private photos I'd sent him over the past few months. My hands shook as I flipped through them. Someone had been monitoring my communications, collecting evidence like I was some kind of criminal. The text looked damning when taken out of context. Flirty messages, inside jokes, complaints about Nate that I'd shared in moments of frustration. One screenshot in particular made my stomach drop. It was from 3 weeks ago, after Nate and I had fought about the wedding budget. I'd texted Owen, "Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I'd made different choices." His response, "It's not too late to make them." My response, "Maybe not." Seeing it in black and white, printed out like evidence in a court case, made me realize how bad it looked. How bad it was. I grabbed my purse and left work immediately, the envelope clutched in my hand. In the parking lot, I called the one person I knew would be on my side. "Ava, I need you." "What's wrong? You sound terrible." "Can you meet me at Murphy's bar? I need a drink and someone to talk to." An hour later, I was 3 drinks in and showing Ava the contents of the envelope. "This is insane," she said, flipping through the screenshots. "Who would do this?" "Julia. Has to be. She's been looking for a reason to break us up since day one." "But how would she get your text messages?" I hadn't thought about that. "I don't know. Maybe she hired someone. Maybe she hacked my phone." "That's illegal." "So is stalking, but here we are." Ava studied one of the screenshots more closely. Some of these messages, "Zadie, they do look kind of bad." "You too." "I'm not judging you. I'm just saying, if I were Nate and I saw these, I'd be upset. They're taken out of context. Owen and I are friends. We've always been flirty. It doesn't mean anything." "Are you sure about that?" The question hung between us. Was I sure? The weekend in Vegas had felt different. The way Owen looked at me, the way I'd felt when he touched my hand, the flutter in my stomach when he'd suggested I deserved better than Nate. "It doesn't matter," I said finally. "What matters is that someone is spying on me, collecting evidence like I'm some kind of criminal." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to confront Nate. This has gone too far." But when I got home that night, Nate still wasn't there. His car was in the driveway, but the house was dark. I found him sitting in the living room. No lights on, just sitting in his chair staring at nothing. "We need to talk," I said, turning on the lamp. He looked up at me, and I was shocked by what I saw. He looked like he'd aged years in the past few days. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hair disheveled, his clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them. "Yes," he said quietly. "We do." I threw the envelope on the coffee table between us. "Did you do this? Did you have someone spying on me?" He picked up the envelope and looked inside, his expression unreadable. "No," he said after a long moment. "I didn't." "Then who—" "Does it matter? The messages are real, aren't they? You actually sent these texts. They're taken out of context." "Are they?" He pulled out one of the screenshots and read it aloud. "Nate doesn't understand me the way you do. Sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating." He looked up at me. "What context makes that okay?" I was venting. People vent to their friends. About their fiancés? To other men? Owen's not another man. He's my friend. He's a man who wants to sleep with you, Zadie. And based on these messages, you know it. The accusation hit me like a slap. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" He stood up and walked to the window. "I've been thinking about this for days. About us, about what we're doing here. And I keep coming back to the same question." "Which is?" He turned to face me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. "Do you even want to marry me?" The question should have been easy to answer. Of course I wanted to marry him. I'd said yes to his proposal. I'd been planning a wedding for 6 months. But sitting there in our living room, looking at this man who suddenly felt like a stranger, I couldn't find the words. "That's what I thought," he said quietly. He walked past me toward the stairs, and I heard his footsteps in the bedroom above. When he came back down, he was carrying a suitcase. "Where are you going?" "Back to my mother's. I think we both need some space to figure out what we really want." "Nate, wait. I'll be in touch about the wedding arrangements. We need to make some decisions." And then he was gone, leaving me alone in our house with a stack of screenshots and the growing realization that I might have pushed things too far. I called Owen. "He left," I said when he answered. "I'm coming over." "No, don't. That'll just make things worse." "Zadie, you can't blame yourself for this. If he can't handle you having friends..." "It's not about having friends, Owen. It's about these messages. Someone printed out our texts and sent them to me at work." Owen was quiet for a long moment. "What messages?" "All of them. Everything we've ever texted about Nate, about my relationship, about Vegas. Someone's been watching us." "That's creepy as hell." "I know. But Owen, reading them all together like that, seeing what we've been saying, maybe Nate has a point." "What do you mean?" "Maybe we've crossed some lines." Another long pause. "Maybe we have. But Zadie, that doesn't mean you're wrong to question whether you're with the right person." After I hung up, I sat alone in the dark house, surrounded by the evidence of my emotional infidelity, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. Nate returned on Friday evening with more than just his suitcase. He brought a manila folder thick with papers, and Julia was with him. I'd spent the past 2 days in a weird limbo, going to work and pretending everything was normal, while fielding increasingly awkward questions from coworkers and family members. The rumor mill was in full swing now. People had theories about my marriage, my weekend in Vegas, my relationship with Owen. Margaret had pulled me aside again to check in, which was corporate speak for fix your personal drama or find another job. When I heard Nate's key in the front door, followed by the click of Julia's heels on our hardwood floor, I knew this wasn't going to be a reconciliation conversation. "Hello, Zadie," Julia said, settling herself on our couch like she owned it. She was dressed in her usual armor, a perfectly tailored blazer, pearls, and an expression that could freeze water. "Julia, I wasn't expecting you." "I asked her to come," Nate said, sitting across from me in the chair he'd occupied during our last fight. "I want a witness for this conversation." "A witness? What is this? A deposition?" "In a way, yes." He opened the folder and spread its contents across the coffee table. I recognized some of the documents immediately: the screenshots from my work mailbox, printed copies of my Instagram post from Vegas, bank statements showing charges to the Bellagio. But there were other things too, things that made my stomach drop. "How did you get these?" I asked, picking up a printout of a text conversation between Owen and me from last month. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me. Someone's been spying on me, violating my privacy." "Your privacy?" Nate's voice was deadly quiet. "Zadie, you posted half of this stuff on social media. The other half, you sent to another man while you were engaged to me." Julia pulled out her phone and set it on the table. "I'm going to record this conversation," she announced. "For legal purposes." "Legal purposes?" I looked between them. What the hell is going on here? Nate leaned forward, his hands clasped in front of him. "I want to hear you say it." "Say what?" "The truth. About Vegas. About Owen. About what you really want." I felt like I was in a courtroom, facing a jury that had already decided my guilt. "I've told you the truth. Owen and I are friends. Nothing happened in Vegas." "Nothing physical," Nate said, "but something happened. I can see it in these messages, in the photos, in the way you've been acting since you got back." He pulled out one of the screenshots and read it aloud. "Owen makes me remember who I used to be before I got so worried about being responsible and boring." He looked up at me. "You sent that 3 days ago." My face burned. I was upset. People say things when they're upset. Do they? Or do they say things when they're finally being honest? Julia leaned forward. "Zadie, we know about the hotel room." My blood turned to ice. What about it? The suite had 2 bedrooms, but according to housekeeping, only 1 bed was used. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. That's not... We didn't... Didn't what? Nate's voice was still quiet, but there was steel underneath it. Didn't sleep together, or didn't get caught. We're friends. Sometimes friends share a bed without it meaning anything. The words came out wrong, defensive and guilty sounding even though they were true. Owen and I had ended up in the same bed Sunday morning, both of us fully clothed, nothing more than cuddling while we watched the sunrise over the strip. It had felt innocent at the time, natural, like something we'd done 100 times in college. But looking at Nate's face, I realized how it sounded. Jesus Christ, Zadie. He ran his hands through his hair. Do you hear yourself? Nothing happened. Something happened. Maybe not sex, but something. You came back from that weekend different, distant, like you'd made some kind of decision. He wasn't wrong. I had felt different after Vegas, clearer about what I wanted, what I was missing, what I deserved. Owen had reminded me of who I used to be, spontaneous, fun, alive. With Nate, I felt like I was playing a role, pretending to be the kind of woman who cared about retirement plans and mortgage payments. I want to know what you want, Nate continued. Not what you think you should want, not what looks good on paper. What do you actually want? It was the same question he'd asked me days ago, the one I hadn't been able to answer. Now, sitting here with Julia's phone recording every word, with evidence of my emotional betrayal spread across the coffee table like a crime scene, I still couldn't find the words. I want you to stop treating me like a criminal, I said finally. I want you to stop acting like one. The silence stretched between us. Julia cleared her throat. Perhaps, she said, it would be best if we discussed the practical matters. What practical matters? Nate reached into the folder and pulled out a legal document. I've been to see a lawyer. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. A lawyer? About the wedding, about our shared assets, about protecting myself legally. Protecting yourself from what? From you. He slid the document across the table. It was a formal letter, typed on law firm letterhead, addressed to me. Notice of intent to dissolve the engagement, I read aloud. Legal action regarding shared assets and property. I looked up at him. Are you serious? Completely. Over some text messages, over a weekend with a friend. Over months of emotional infidelity, over public humiliation, over the fact that you can't look me in the eye and tell me you want to be my wife. I stared at the legal document, the formal language making everything feel final and cold. This is insane. You can't sue someone for breaking up with them. I'm not suing you for breaking up with me. I'm protecting my assets from someone who's been lying to me for months while planning a wedding that cost me $15,000 in deposits. The number hit me like a slap. $15,000. Money he'd spent on flowers and venues and photographers for a wedding that was apparently never going to happen. You're being ridiculous, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. Am I? Let me ask you one more time, Zadie. Do you want to marry me? He was looking at me intently, and I realized this was my last chance. I could apologize, promise to cut contact with Owen, beg for forgiveness. I could salvage this relationship, this engagement, this life we'd built together. Instead, I thought about Owen's words in Vegas. You deserve someone who celebrates your spontaneity instead of trying to control it. I thought about the way I'd felt dancing in that casino, free and alive, and myself. I thought about Nate's careful budgets and planned schedules, and the way he made me feel like I was too much, too loud, too everything. I don't know, I said quietly. Nate nodded like he'd expected that answer. Then we're done. He stood up and gestured to Julia, who stopped the recording and gathered her things. The letter explains everything, he said. You have 30 days to respond. I'd suggest getting your own lawyer. Nate, wait. But he was already walking toward the door, Julia following behind him like a protective shadow. "For what it's worth," he said, turning back one last time, "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I just wish you'd figured it out before you destroyed what we had." The front door closed behind them with a soft click, leaving me alone with the legal documents and the wreckage of my engagement. I called Owen immediately. "He's suing me," I said when he answered. "What? That's insane. Can he do that?" "Apparently. Something about shared assets and wedding expenses." "I'm coming over." "No, Owen, don't you see? This is exactly what got us into this mess. Every time something goes wrong, I run to you instead of dealing with it myself." "That's what friends do. They support each other." "Is that what we are? Friends?" The question hung in the air between us. Finally, Owen sighed. "I don't know anymore, Zadie. I don't think either of us knows what we are." After I hung up, I sat alone in the house that no longer felt like home, reading through the legal document that would change everything. At the bottom, in small print, was a line that made my blood run cold. Respondent has 30 days to vacate the shared residence. He wasn't just ending our engagement, he was kicking me out of our home. The law office of Peterson Martinez and Associates occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass and steel and intimidation. I'd spent the past 2 weeks trying to find my own lawyer, but every consultation had told me the same thing. Nate had a solid case, and I was probably going to lose. "He's not suing you for breaking up with him," my attorney David Peterson had explained during our first meeting. "He's seeking restitution for documented financial losses based on misrepresentation of intent to marry." "In English, please." "He spent money on a wedding based on your promise to marry him. If he can prove you were already planning to leave, which your text messages suggest, then you defrauded him. That's ridiculous. That's the law." Now, sitting in the conference room across from Nate and his lawyer, I felt like I was facing a firing squad. Julia sat beside Nate, her presence a constant reminder of how completely I'd lost this battle before it even began. Nate looked different, professional, distant, like a stranger wearing my ex-fiancé's face. He was dressed in his best suit, his hair perfectly styled, his expression unreadable. This wasn't the man who used to make me coffee in the morning or worry about my safety when I stayed out late. This was someone who'd been hurt badly enough to fight back with lawyers and legal documents. "Ms. Loxley," Nate's attorney began, "my client is prepared to offer a settlement." "I'm listening." "Full reimbursement of wedding expenses totaling $15,467. Immediate vacation of the shared residence, and a signed agreement that you will not contact my client or his family members going forward. A restraining order, a no-contact agreement, voluntary but legally binding." I looked at David, who nodded grimly. "It's a fair offer, considering the evidence." The evidence. They had everything: the text messages, the photos, bank records showing the hotel charges, even testimony from the housekeeping staff at the Bellagio about the unused bed. Somehow, Nate had built an airtight case that made me look like a calculating fraud who'd strung him along while planning my escape. "I don't have $15,000, I said. "We're prepared to accept a payment plan," Nate's lawyer replied. $250 per month for 5 years. 5 years. Plus interest. I stared across the table at Nate, trying to find some trace of the man I'd once loved. "Is this really what you want? To destroy me financially over some text messages?" He met my eyes for the first time since I'd entered the room. "This isn't about revenge, Zadie. It's about consequences." "Consequences for what? For being honest about my feelings? For lying to me for months? For humiliating me in front of our families? For making me believe you wanted to build a life with me while you were already planning your exit?" His voice was calm, professional, but I could see the hurt underneath. This wasn't just about money or legal technicalities. This was about a man who'd been betrayed by someone he trusted. "I never meant to hurt you," I said quietly. "But you did." And now you need to take responsibility for that. The conference room smelled like copier toner and endings. Julia, Nate's lawyer, didn't blink. 14 days to vacate. Keys on the counter when you leave. 2 weeks. My voice cracked. I don't even have a deposit saved. Nate looked at me like I was a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong meeting. You spent the deposit money on Owen's birthday trip to Tulum, he said, calm as reading a grocery list. Remember? He slid the settlement across. 15 grand, my half of the cancelled wedding, payable over 5 years. The couch we picked out together, his. The espresso machine he bought me for my 30th, his. My name wasn't on the lease anymore. I laughed, wild. So that's it. I disappear and you get to play the victim. Nate finally met my eyes. You disappeared months ago, Zadie. I just made it official. Julia tapped her pen. Offer expires close of business. After that we file, and the judgment triples. I reached for my phone to call Owen, someone, anyone. 3 missed calls from him. I hit call back. It went straight to voicemail. Nate almost smiled. He changed his number yesterday. Turns out, I'll leave my fiancé for you is easier when there's no ring, no drama, no actual consequences. I signed. 2 weeks later, I carried the last box down the stairs of the apartment we'd painted sage green together. Nate wasn't there. He'd sent movers. They worked around me like I was already a ghost. The studio I found smelled like old curry and broken dreams. I slept on an air mattress for a month. Owen ghosted completely once he realized my freedom came with debt, a ruined reputation, and 0 fairy tale ending. Last I heard, he was dating a yoga instructor who doesn't do drama. Nate married her, the calm one with the steady job and no secret boyfriends. In the backyard, we used to argue over landscaping. I saw the photos on Instagram before I blocked everyone we knew. 5 years of garnished wages later, I mailed the final check. No note. He didn't need one. I got exactly what I wanted. Out. Turns out out is just another word for alone, with better lighting and worse furniture. Nate got the life I threw away. I got the lesson. Some exits aren't doors, they're trapdoors, and gravity always wins.